What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York, calling from the quarantine zone again. And this time we are here with Sydney Sherwood. Thanks so much for being here. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you here. I was just jamming the Headspace EP. This is a really, really fun listen. Being that this is an EP and this is your second EP as well, could this almost serve as a good representation of what maybe a full length album is going to sound like? Or is there a lot more to be experimented and a lot more uncharted territory to just step into?
I feel like for me, I never like to put myself in a box genre wise, and I really loved the Headspace EP and what I did on that one. But I feel like there's definitely more room for experimentation, even though I really love the sound of the last EP. My first EP was more singer songwriter, kind of borderline pop, and this one is definitely more alternative and rock, and I could definitely see myself going in that direction. But I like to experiment and see what fits how I feel, what the songs are like, and how that correlates with the music and all of that. So I feel like there's still more room for experimentation for me.
Yeah. Well, I thought the Headspace EP it actually like did give me a lot of nostalgia towards like the singer-songwriter rock vibe. Like
Yeah,
like I don't know if you're fans of these artists by any means, but like it reminded me of like the classic days of like Michelle Branch and
yeah,
along those lines, that like alternative vibe back when like singer and songwriters were like the dominant genre on radio. Were you taking inspiration mainly from that singer songwriter perspective, or were you trying to maybe make it a little bit more like a band, if you will?
for me, I feel like for this record, my biggest inspiration was that sound. I wanted it to have a specific sound. The first thing I recorded was Creep off of that record. And after I recorded that, I was like, this is exactly what I want the EP to sound like. I wanted to have this rock but still relaxed vibe, but alternative. And it was something that I didn't feel like a lot of female artists were really doing. And I was like, this is a really cool genre and it's really cool space for me musically. So that's where I took inspiration from, was definitely the sound from Creep. And from Creep is how we kind of created the whole record.
Was Creep almost kind of like the pinnacle song, if you will, that almost made you find who you were?
Yeah, it definitely was. It definitely was. I remember sitting in the studio with my producer Brian Craddock, and he was like, "What do you want to write about?" And I was like, I don't really know. And we were just kind of shooting around ideas, and I was like, I don't really know if I want to write a song about anxiety and depression. I said it's kind of a weird topic for me, and he's like, you know what? That would be something really cool to write about. So I had no intention of writing something like that. We went in and we wrote it, and it's probably one of my favorite songs that I've ever recorded and ever written. And that song was definitely the moment where I was like, yeah, this is definitely a direction I want to go in.
A lot of songs that address subject matter that could be uneasy for people, like especially when the artist is like a little unsure about it, it normally manifests itself into being like a classic song, like "Under the Bridge" by Chili Peppers. I think Anthony Kiedis was extremely hesitant on writing about his past heroin
Yeah.
addiction. It's a very touching subject matter, but Rick Rubin being the sadist producer that he is, he managed to get that out of him. So like
Yeah.
I've always thought that if it feels uncomfortable writing it at first, then you should go for it.
Yeah, and I've definitely learned that too. There have been songs where after I write them, I'm like, I don't really know if I love that or if I love how it fits with me. And then you play it for other people and they hear it and they're like, no, this is something that not a lot of people are willing to touch on. And like, if you do have that type of song and it can help somebody, then you should be producing it and releasing it and doing all of that. And since then, I feel like one of my main inspirations for my music has been my battle with anxiety and depression. And it's like a blessing and a curse because it's normally a lot of my songs are a little bit more heavier on subject matter, but it's also a blessing because it allows me to kind of release those emotions and use music as a way to cope with that. So that's probably been my favorite part about music is me being able to channel my feelings and emotions into it.
Well, I felt like every song on the EP had like its own vibe. Like opening up from Wolves and ending with All the Aces. I mean, it was like really with just 6 songs, you were able to create quite the emotional roller coaster. Is it fair to say that
That's I'm glad to hear you say that because that's definitely what we were going for. So that's great.
anytime? I'm just. Is it fair to say that every song was representative of a specific emotion that you were feeling at a particular time?
Yeah, definitely. Every song is about a personal experience that I've been through. So Wolves is about my anxiety and depression, and how there was this one particular time. It's come and gone throughout my life. Depression, I have been able to say that I've really worked on, and I haven't had a bad bout of it in a very long time. But there was a specific period where it was really difficult for me, and I did not know what life was going to look like, and I didn't really know if I was going to really continue, living in a way that like I was going to be free from it. And so that song was just about me basically crying out to God and being like, God, you have to help me with this because I have no idea what I'm going to do here. And that's how that song was born. And then you have songs like Let Me Down, which is about, a potential relationship that doesn't work out and somebody that is just really constantly never meeting your expectations. And Horizon's Edge is probably one of the most personal songs on the record. That was about my grandpa passing away. So all the songs are very representative of something that I've gone through in my life and experiences that I've been through and those emotions that come with that.
Do you find it like maybe like the longer you're working on a song, because sometimes you are working on a song for days, weeks, if you're Tool, 13 years. Do you find it maybe like the longer you're working on something, the harder it is to kind of like maintain that emotion, whether it's a positive or negative one? Do you find it like harder to maintain? Do you like to feel the same way when you end a song as you do when you start it?
Yeah, so I feel like after you go through the recording process, and it's not in a bad way, you're a little bit like desensitized to what you just wrote. When you have to sing the same thing over and over and over again, when you're recording it in parts, sometimes the individual parts lose a little bit of that meaning. But when you hear it back, that's when like everything starts to come flooding back. So for me with Horizon's Edge, when we wrote it, I lost my grandfather during the pandemic, but he had struggled with many issues and dementia and Parkinson's. He was really deteriorating. And when we wrote that, I actually wrote it the day after he passed away. So it was like a very fresh and real emotion going into that writing session. And it was very hard to write that day. And then as I recorded it, it kind of became easier. And then it became this almost like comforting thing where I was taking what just happened and putting it into music, which is my favorite thing about music is being able to do that. So with certain songs, the emotions come back when I listen back to the full track. With other songs, I'm like, okay, I've sung this a million times, so like I still love it and it has so much meaning to me, but I can disassociate myself from it a little bit more.
Yeah, and I've always said that there's like a big difference between the struggling artist and the artist or the person that struggles and makes art. I feel like there is a massive difference between the two, because
Yeah.
I feel like a struggling artist is somebody who struggles while they create their art, and that's part of their process. And then there's
Yeah.
people who struggle with their art that ultimately serves as a source of inspiration for it. I definitely consider you to be the latter. And do you, though, when you like return to, when you're performing these live and you're going back to, a darker, does it almost put you back in that dark experience when you're performing it live and you're replicating it? Or do you almost feel like it is almost kind of like for lack of better words, like deteriorating to kind of bring that negative emotion on stage, which is what inspired that song to begin with?
Yeah, I think that whenever I perform it again after the recording process, it's relatively easy. There are some songs that I'll write and I'm like, performing that would be a little hard. But I think the more you do it and the more you, like I said, with the recording, like I mean, sometimes I'm doing 10 different takes until I get the right one. So when I'm performing, it usually never brings me back to that negative place. And I think a lot of the feeling is like getting the energy from the crowd too. And that kind of wipes away like any negative feeling that I might have. So that hasn't happened to me where it's been so heavy and like so uncomfortable. Just because I feel like the environment of all the people and everybody watching, and if they know the song singing along, that always helps me.
Yeah, I remember I was interviewing All That Remains in 2019, and I was asking them about like their hit ballad, which is like a slow, some people characterize it as butt rock. I think it's an amazing song, but like,
Yeah.
like they said, because the crowd reaction is so good for a slower song, it feels like a high energy song. So
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of like an oxymoron in a way.
Yeah.
When like do you obviously your experiences determine the lyricism and what you're addressing, but do you also feel that it determines the music as well? Like let's say that this EP was like instrumental, do you think it would almost convey the same emotion or even the same message?
I think so. That's something that sometimes I struggle with. I would consider myself a songwriter first. I play guitar as well, but I'm definitely not a mastermind. I can play pretty well, if I had to play a show or something. And that's normally how I write all my music is on my guitar. But sometimes I like to collaborate with other people so that when we match the music and the lyrics, it fits perfectly. Because sometimes I'm stuck musically with the melody and how it's supposed to go, but lyrics, I will always have the lyrics. But so I feel like to answer that question, it really depends. Sometimes I feel stuck and I need somebody else to help me come up with the music, and sometimes I'm writing the lyrics and I know exactly how I want the song to sound and how I want it to go.
Do you want it to be open to interpretation, the music, or do you kind of want the listener to maybe engage with you and maybe see things from your point of view in a way?
It's so interesting that you say that because I feel like every song that I've released, I've seen people take on a different meaning from it. And that's the coolest thing because there was one song I wrote, and I'm trying to think, I think it was Let Me Down. And that was about a relationship and how that didn't work out. And I had somebody contact me and just say like it was a completely different scenario, but they fully related to it. And that's not how I intended to write it, because I wrote it about my personal experience, and then I got to see how that person took that song and molded it to their own experience, which was the coolest thing. And that's another one of my favorite things about songwriting and releasing music is that whenever I see people take on those new meanings, it's always like it brings a new life to the song that I never saw before because it's not coming from my perspective, it's coming from somebody else's.
Well, and you, in a way, just answered the next question I was about to ask. But like, being that especially with Headspace, and even the title of the EP itself sounds like it's a very personal subject matter, and obviously most of the songs are very personal. But could like external inspiration come? Like, couldn't you get inspiration from stuff that maybe you haven't experienced, but maybe through other mediums of art or through just simply observing? The world is a very, very interesting place, to say the least.
Yeah, yeah. I think especially for this record too, when we were trying to come up with the sound and how certain songs were going to sound, I definitely drew inspiration from some of my favorite artists, or there's a certain style of writing that I really love. I'm a huge Creed fan and I love Scott Stapp, and his writing is so like metaphorical and it's very like hidden meaning like, and with Wolves, I really wanted that to be the case. So obviously I've shared about the song, but somebody who would listen to that might not know exactly what it means. But for that song specifically, I took outside inspiration from some of my favorite artists and all of that. And I feel like it's important to not just look within yourself for inspiration, but to look around you as well. And, it doesn't even have to be something that you're directly experiencing. Maybe it's just something you're looking at and that gives you the inspiration. But musically, I took a lot of influence from, Scott Stapp for Wolves specifically. And that was my intent with that song, was to kind of do the same thing, but not copy.
I have to say, as somebody who interviews tons of black metal bands and death metal bands and like grindcore bands, it's so different to hear somebody holds Creed as an inspiration, and I think it's awesome. I mean,
Thank you.
yeah, and I don't care what people say. Creed was a fantastic band, and I actually saw
Yeah.
Scott Stapp do a solo show in 2019, and it was great.
So did I.
Oh,
It was great.
where,
It was so good.
was it at Sony Hall?
I went to go see them at Starland Ballroom in
Oh,
New Jersey.
all right. I saw them at Sony Hall in Manhattan, which is like the new BB King.
Yeah.
And it was killer. I was actually watching it with his wife.
That's so awesome. Yeah, listen, that concert, that was one of my last concerts, obviously before the pandemic. And that one, I was just like, oh my gosh, what a great performer. And he sounded great. And the band was phenomenal.
Yeah.
That's something that for me, whenever I go and see a show, like you're going to see the artist, but when the band is like just as good in every single aspect, I was like, oh, this is great. My whole family went. We had a blast. It was such a great show.
Yeah, I thought he had a guitar player on that tour that had an uncanny resemblance to Mark Tremonti. Actually,
Yes, yes.
I was like,
Yep.
I actually asked their PR because I was covering the show. I was interviewing the band opening for them, and like I asked, is this like a secret Creed reunion that we don't know about or something? Like,
Yeah.
what the hell is
Yeah.
this?
And now he's doing his solo stuff, and I'm actually going to see them with Daughtry and with Seven Dust.
That's
I
a
think
great
it's
lineup.
November.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. Like, I mean, people again, like I listened to the Black Dahlia Murder and Mayhem, and Cannibal Corpse, but like, I've always admired like the way that Creed had the ability to resonate with people, especially at the time that they came out when the world was dominated by like the Nine Inch Nails and new metal and Limp
Yeah,
Bizkit and all that. Like they came out at a time when like that genre was like it was considered more dead then than it did in the grunge era, and they still went out and
yeah.
killed it. So you know,
Yeah, I love it. I that's one of my favorite kinds of music. Actually, I am like the biggest 90s grunge fan. That's probably where I thrive musically. That's what I listen to most now, I feel like. And I actually just got to see Pearl Jam at the See Here Now Festival in Asbury Park. I'm from New Jersey. And I went to that, and that was like the coolest thing ever. Like, because Eddie Vedder is one of my inspirations, and being able to see him live, even like after all these years, because obviously I was born in 2002, so it was way before, way after they, when they first started. And being able to see like my inspirations and people that I've drawn inspiration from for music and see them live was such a cool experience. So I'm like the biggest like 90s grunge, also 2000s rock, like Stains, Seether,
I love Seether. Sean Morgan is like one of my idols. I think he is
yeah,
an absolute genius, and
yeah,
that's like my number one bucket list interview I need to check off. But
yeah, he's amazing. One of my favorite albums of all time is the One Cold Night, but the live album.
yeah,
I love that. That's honestly one of my favorite things, and yeah, that's where I like thrive musically. That's what I listen to mostly.
yeah, Fine Again is my go-to high song as well. Fun little note
Yep.
in there. But and maybe I'll plug a band for your recommendation. I don't know if you ever heard of them, but the Veer Union. If you like that, you would like them as well. They have a little bit of a heavier edge to them, but
Awesome.
they're from Vancouver. Their singer Crispin is just he's like an angel and a demon in one voice.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, so I'd look up the Veer Union. And the final question I wanted to ask you is just what's in store now. Obviously, thanks to this fucking virus that shall not be named. Obviously, shows are up in the air. There have been shows happening. I've been fortunate to see a couple, but things are happening. Could you please? I could just picture Sydney Sherwood, the Bitter End in New York City. That would be a great show and a great venue. Can you make that happen, please?
Yeah, listen. So for me, I played my release show at the Stone Pony, and for my first EP, and then I was kind of like really just working on music and songwriting, so I wasn't focused on playing shows. And now that things in New Jersey here are much better, and different venues are starting to open up. I mean, every venue has their own rules, but I am very excited to start getting things together to start playing shows, because that's something I feel like I haven't done enough of. And it's just such a fun experience. And I just remember my release show, and I was like, I wish I could like feel this all the time, like it's such a great experience, and it's so fun. And I love being able to share the music with people. And I think that now that things are starting to calm down a little bit, I definitely want to get out and play more. So that's a huge thing for me. And then really just songwriting. Literally right after this, I have a songwriting session with one of my favorite writers. And I've been very focused on that for a long time. So I think shows is going to be a really good thing for me in the future.
Yeah, I could just when I was listening to this EP, I'm like, we need a show at the Bitter End. Like that would be like you are right now the artist I think of when I think of that venue, and I've never even seen you play there yet. So just
That's, thank you.
yeah, little plug and maybe recommendation. Let's make that happen.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but thank you so much, everybody. Sydney Sherwood. Be sure to check out the Headspace EP if you haven't already. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.